Okay, this is the 17th public service announcement of Artho Economics and the FiledEvidence.com's Law Library Archives, serving mankind as an international consultant of economic and government choices. Now, under Artho Economics, yes, you're entitled to your opinion and or whoever paid you for said opinion, but you're not entitled to mine, nor are you entitled to molest the facts within FiledEvidence.com to bear false witness against me. Now, there are companies that do legal research to give legal opinions and publish landmark cases. And there's been a couple of them who have published their opinions of these landmark decisions within their own law library archives that promote, endorse, and document the new case law changes from this day forth. In spite of knowing full well their legal research of my filed evidence, of course, the same filed evidence, the bankruptcy trustee reviewed by rule of law, and yet failed to immediately report the committed felonies to the U.S. Attorney, U.S. Marshal Service, and or the U.S. Trustee, as we've talked about before. Now, some of these research companies brag on their artificial intelligence, and in spite of this so-called artificial intelligence, they willingly published or participated as members of the RICO Liability Pyramid's false claims against FiledEvidence.com's unmolested facts. And those facts include the 95th, which is the state district court, in Dallas County, which is the wrong county to file it. I live in Lamar County. And yet, in their ultimate wisdom, they decided it was okay to backfile violations of the Bankruptcy Court's Rule of Law, 2016, and the 95th racist, misogynist discrimination against my innocent third-party wife of Hispanic and Indian heritage, who was in fact never a party to my prenup and separate case. And yet the 95th, through government confiscation, embezzled her prenup and separate bank accounts containing federal designated funding. And then the government confiscated her prenup and separate homesteaded ranch land that was financed by the USDA federal designated funded land loan for women of Hispanic and Indian heritage. While the 95th ruled against my discharge case, and the 95th ruled their own illegal judgment against me, let me quote this ruling. The entire document is void and it is no legal effect and is hereby removed. Now the lawyers within the RICO liability pyramid, as of April the 19th, 2023, filed this, and it quotes that Artho versus bank lawyers scam is still, and quoted, as ongoing. The research and the so-called artificial intelligence endorsements, promotions, and documentations of these new case law changes that any court of law can now legally and knowingly continue to legalize negative cash flow by corruption, refuse to collect government-owed tax fine to discourage corruption as federal designated funding fines and retribution, which is another form of Arthos economics. And under Arthos economics, the courts can legally and knowingly refuse the peacetime accountability of said corruption, which of course would eventually collapse any nation's vulnerable economy. Economies are very fragile things. You just don't go around creating new case law to find the victims and to encourage corruption. But anyway, that was their choice. Now, due to the ongoing and new case law changes from the past, present, and or into the future of the ongoing, to avoid the scams, conflicted confusion, all of these court cases have been consolidated into Artho versus bank/lawyer scam. In other words, the cause and effect from way back when is still causing and effect everything which is related as the ongoing case. And to avoid the confusion, everything is consolidated under Artho versus bank/lawyer scam. Now, within their scam, my first legal team sent me a Texas lawyer's creed, and apparently, of course, I've been made the butt of a cruel judicial joke, and apparently this creed would serve only a court jester as a stand-up committee to make fun of tax-paying commoners such as myself. But Exhibit 17 confirms that my bank's Executive Vice President of Special Assets, under oath at a May 15, 2018 hearing, testified my first legal team canceled the forensic examination, and the bank's Executive Vice President of Special Assets also refused the requested production of the documentation's existence, signatures therefore of said forensic examination. Now, the cause and effect of that is you don't go around filing foreclosures against innocent tax-paying commoners if you can't even produce the documentation that says you even have the authority to do this. Again, I am the butt of a cruel judicial joke, but it is what it is. Of course, at some point in time, this cause and effect in each and every count, each and every violation against the Constitution, the rule of law, and against those who violated their oaths of office and or professions, will be held accountable, and the rulings will be overturned. And all the federal designated funding, fines, retributions will be collected, paid in full to the government, and to the victims thereof. But until then, we have to honor the courts and uphold the Constitution's checks and balances of these new case law changes from this day forward. This is what it's all about. I mean, we have to honor those until they're overthrown. Now remember, constitutionally, we're all created equal. So against these people within the RICO liability pyramid, or against anybody, you can breach your so-called creed, and you can violate your constitutional oath, and you can violate the client's privileges or contracts that I had with my first legal team, who in fact refused and or failed to obtain the document's existence, signature, examinations, appraisals, and billing accountability within Exhibit 17. Now, these conflicts of interest from my first legal team attempted to close me out of the court and my rights of discovery. Now, of course, the constitutional checks and balances of what goes around comes around. Now, you could file these same things against and especially against those who participated within the RICO liability pyramid, especially within the same jurisdictions where these acts of economic treason were committed. And these new case law changes are in fact constitutional further due process of the law. That until it's overturned and done, it is still constitutionally further due process of the law. Even when it's overturned, the time period in which this is done until it's overturned still qualifies as a new case law changes as a get out of jail free card, even during those periods of time. To release past like-kind felons from prisons and fines, avoid prosecuting of lifetime felons, and the further future felons' unsustainable short-term ill-gotten gains, as we've talked before. Now, when it comes to the international markets, they don't care, and they don't fear. It's basically whoever has the best quality products and the least amount of complications. That's who they're going to trade with. It's who's cash flowing, and nobody likes to have to come back on deals. And especially courts who so willingly chose to rule these new case law changes as economic treason. Of course, anybody knows that'll collapse any nation's vulnerable economy and collapse the economic prosperity of all mankind and eventually collapse world peace. What did you think was going to happen? Time and time again, history reflects and current events reconfirm these age-old social disorders afflicted against the tax-paying commoners, positive cash flow opportunities, and investors, sustainable long-term investments. And yet again, when any government chooses to favor the negative cash flow of corruption's unsustainable short-term ill-gotten gains, seriously, what did you think was going to happen when you created these new case law changes? Now, the courts had the audacity to find me with illegal judgments, and I'm currently being threatened with debtor imprisonment. However, I was raised by a World War II Marine Corps sergeant who hit the beaches of Okinawa in 1945. Probably one of the worst battles inflicted on both sides. It was just, horrible, horrible waste. And when I was a snotty-nosed kid, my father and his Marine Corps fellow soldiers, they would start talking and remembering the horrors of wars, inhumanities inflicted by politicians' prior negative cash flow choices. Now, they would, about 11 o'clock every night, they would finally say, look, we didn't vow to protect any politician. The Marines vowed to protect the Constitution against foreign and domestic enemies. And if I've heard that once, I've heard it 100 times. And it was just the reason they fought and died for the Constitution. Thus, to honor those who fought and died to protect the Constitution, the least I can do is stand my ground and stand up for my constitutional rights. Now, the younger generation, they are tech savvy, and yeah, they're smarter, stronger, faster, taller, and yes, the younger generation is even better looking. And the World Wide Web of communications, which has its yin and yang, can inform the younger generation of how to avoid wars in humanity inflicted by politicians' prior negative cash flow choices. The younger generation also know their right to keep and bear arms to defend themselves and their families, in spite of the known cowards who abuse these rights and the aftermath judicial or justifiable anger. It's a horrible thing, and these cowards should be what they are. They're just cowards. And they should be referred to as that in the media, and to help to discourage future cowards from doing the same thing. The younger generation, through their communication data, also know the economics of warfare. Of an individual's sling shoulder mounted weapon to defend themselves and destroy the Goliath multi-million-dollar and multi-billion-dollar tanks, aircrafts, and or ships to in fact drain the Constitution's foreign and domestic enemy war chest funded. So in other words, if you've got a $1,000 shoulder mount weapon and you take out a multi-billion-dollar absolute powerful weaponry that's trying to take your assets and your rights to rape, plunder, and kill whoever they want to. The younger generation, they do savvy this. Don't ever sell them short. They're smart people. And with the tech's advancements that they understand, and we all understand, there's so many advancements in crop production, and the world has a wonderful future if we keep corruption in check. But through greenhouses and solar panels, the younger generation know they can lessen the chance of food and fuel shortages to run an EV car. Now, this lessens the inhumanities of wars and the absolute powerful's negative cash flow by corruption. You might win the battle, but you will lose the war.